to everybody that's taken the time to attend this presentation here this afternoon in Toronto. I should add that as of this morning, we as Ion Energy completed an acquisition of a highly prospective hard rock project in the Northwest Territories. It spans about 5,700 hectares and is in a district of proven lithium pegmatites. So while the company was born with Mongolia as the focus, we have, of course, expanded now to North America as well. And I would encourage our listeners to visit our website to obtain that press release. And if you have any questions following your review of that press release, I'm happy to connect with you directly. That said, I will be making some forward-looking statements, so please be aware of that. And I'll go over the team and sort of discuss our Mongolia assets. But then again, I do urge the listeners to visit our website to look at the acquisition, again, that was announced this morning. So a bit about the team, which I think is always important. My background has been in asset management. I spent about 13 years at Invesco in multiple capacities, both in London, Hong Kong, and Toronto. I joined the mining landscape about 7 years ago, although my father's been in mining for the last 4 decades, so you could say it runs in the blood. I co-founded the company alongside Matthew Wood, my chairman, an Australian national. He's also the CEO of Steppe Gold, I beg your pardon, the chairman of Steppe Gold and the chairman of Aranjin Resources. He is a Rio Tinto Gold Scholar geologist, so he's had a lot of experience with rocks physically, but he's also had a lot of experience exiting various mining companies around the world. More recently, Avanco Resources in Brazil, a company that he was the founding chairman on, sold to Oz Minerals for $440 million in March 2018. Wendy Lee is a recent addition to our team. She is based just outside of Shanghai. She has a career that spanned at Noble Resources as a commodities trader between Mongolia and China, so she understands both regions very well. And she's placed in Shanghai purely to help advance our conversations with strategics that we think we will ultimately JV with or exit to in the future. Batatuma Rocher is one of our 2 Mongolian nationals. We believe it's important to have Mongolian nationals on your board, given we do operate in Mongolia. He is the chief executive of Steppe Gold, which is a gold producer in Mongolia today, producing about 40,000 ounces per annum at a cash cost of $850 per ounce. And Steppe Gold very recently also announced the acquisition of a Peruvian gold asset as well. Neil Varach is an investment banking background professional. He's been on the board since inception of the company. And his background stems in investment banking, but he's also over at Steppe Gold, where he's executive vice president of that company. And then Engtushin Kishiksuren is a geologist by trade. He's had 30 plus years of experience. And being in Mongolia and being a Mongolian, he has access to the necessary skill sets, both in terms of equipment and personnel for us in country to be successful. John McVickers, our CFO, he used to be a partner at EY, so we're happy to have him. But the next 5 individuals that I'm about to speak to are really where the lithium experience should resonate with our listeners. Paul Fornazzari was the original chairman of Lithium Americas, valued at well over $4 billion today. He was the founding director of Neo Lithium, and he is a senior partner at Fasken. And being the senior partner at Fasken, he was the lawyer in charge of selling Neo Lithium to Zijin about 15 months ago for $1 billion. Don Haynes is my chief advisor or technical advisor. He is a legend in the lithium space. He's an advisor to various lithium companies around the world, including Lithium Royalty Corp, which is a Warta-backed royalty company focused on battery metals, specifically lithium, at about $1 billion market cap at the time of IPO about 6 weeks ago. But Don also wrote the very first 43101 for any lithium company on the TSX, and he wrote the guideline document that everybody in the lithium space has to follow when they file a 43101 on the TSX. Don's been on site 4 times, and he guides our team in country with their exploration programs. Dr. Hashbat Dashtseren is a local PhD hydrogeologist, an individual that assisted us with locating our assets in Mongolia. But importantly, he is a skilled hydrogeologist in his own right. So between him and Don, they sort of planned and arranged for the exploration programs in country, and we're very happy to have him. And then Dr. Mark King, who was the qualified person on file at Neo Lithium before it sold to Zijin. He's been on site once now. He continues to advise us on our hydrogeological sampling, and he was the, of course, qualified person at Neo. So very, very strong skill set there from a hydrogeological perspective. And then Dr. Mark King is more on the supply chain side. He's an individual that was at Lithium Americas, and then he moved over to Tesla, where he was in charge of building the necessary infrastructure for the production of Gigafactory 1 coming online in Nevada. So we started on with a very strong team. We thought it's important that we did that. We started the company in 2017. The vast majority of lithium companies that you may or may not hear from today have come to light sort of in the last 2 years on the back of this lithium price running. And of course, that will show us which ones can remain productive or ultimately come to production now that the price has started to come down again. So in 2017, when we started the company, lithium prices were 2,000 a ton. They're currently sitting at about 19 to 24,000 per ton, depending on which medium you look at. And so we weren't chasing that high price of lithium. And we believe that Mongolia, with its geology very similar to that of the Atacama in South America, was a good place for us to start. So today we have 110,000 hectares across 2 licenses, as Sharon introduced at the earlier stage of this conversation. We're first movers in the lithium brine space. Nobody else has gone after brine in Mongolia. And of course, exploration is underway and commenced shortly after we went public. One of the questions we get quite regularly, I beg your pardon, quite regularly is why Mongolia? What's special about Mongolia? Well, to us, Mongolia is about 1.5 million square kilometers with a population of 3.5 million people. Only 1% of the country has ever been issued for exploration licenses. It is home to one of the largest copper gold deposits in the world that's run by Rio Tinto with the Oyu Tolgoi deposit. And we believe that it has an untapped and unlimited potential for various metals. And that's evidenced now with the likes of Rio Tinto consolidating Turquoise Hill shares to ultimately bring an investment to Mongolia of about $8.5 billion. So when a major like Rio Tinto is paying attention, it's important that the rest of the world does as well. Mongolia has a new revival policy whereby it's working with China to ensure that the access to critical metals and goods and services happens uninterrupted. We've seen that evidence with the government of Mongolia visiting China on various occasions in the last 15 to 18 months. As recently as Monday this week, the trade minister of Mongolia was in Beijing talking to her counterparty to help expand and advance the One Belt, One Road initiative through that country. And then in terms of Chinese investment in the country, that's now been evidenced by Zijin. They put in 26 million with up to 52 million going into Xanadu, which is a copper explorer in Mongolia. And Sinomine, which is a company that owns Tanco in Manitoba, which is Canada's largest lithium exporter, has also now invested in a group called Lithium Century in Mongolia, so another lithium company. So we were first movers, but we're seeing now that people are actually investing in Mongolia for lithium, and a company like Sinomine that has operations in Zimbabwe, in Canada, and in various Asian countries as well is now paying attention to Mongolia as a potential jurisdiction. We've been in Mongolia as a group since 2009. So, a good 14 years of experience in that country. My chairman, Matthew Wood, went to Mongolia in 2009 seeking gold because he is a gold geologist, but he ended up being there during the coal boom. And so he worked with the local government and the local personnel to start a company by the name of Hunu Coal, which held a number of licenses that were early stage in the coal space. He had a $20 million IPO on the ASX and then brought in a strategic investment of 9.9% in order for him to advance it to inferred resources across the asset. And that strategic ultimately bought Hunu Coal from him for $500 million in cash 18 months later. When that exit occurred, there were 350 employees, of which only 3 were expats. So there's enough skilled labor in Mongolia for you to be successful without bringing in expensive expats. In 2016, when I joined this group, we went to Mongolia looking at a project that was held by Centerra Gold, and the name of that project is Altan Saganovo, ATO, in Dornod province. We acquired that using backing from the Elliott Group, so Triple Flag Mining Finance, and Paul Singer in New York. It went public in March 2018. It was the only mining IPO on the main board of the TSX, so very tough resource environment. We managed to take that public. And fast forward 14 months, it was in production. So not only have we had a successful exit where we've consolidated resources and built an inferred resource, but we've also built a mine, which I think 98% of all junior miners will tell you they have not done. So it's an achievement in itself. With Ion Energy, Our goal was to acquire as many lithium licenses as possible in Mongolia. We've done so now with 2 assets. We went public in 2020 at a time when we didn't have access to Mongolia, but battery metals were sort of slowly coming into favor. And what we'd like to highlight here is, ION is following the path of Hunu Coal, where we'll consolidate and look for a potential exit from a strategic. But now that we've built a mine in Mongolia, in a country that is very seldom understood, we may elect to JV with a strategic to ultimately build a lithium mine in country that would provide a beneficiated product at a higher tax rate, generating more revenue for our shareholders, and of course, helping to advance Mongolia as well. In terms of government, very quickly, as recently as PDAC, I was in Mongolia 4 times last year, and I met with the Ministry of Mining every time that I am in country. But as recently as PDAC, the Minister of Mining, as well as the opposition leader, held a breakfast that included Sprott, Rio Tinto, Ion Energy, Steppe Gold, and various other operators in Mongolia. And they were each saying the same thing. So the opposition was saying the exact same thing that the incumbent was saying, which is a very difficult thing to see anywhere in the world. If you draw the comparison of the United States, it's close to impossible to have the Republicans and Democrats in the same room saying the same thing. I think a similar state would be said about the Canadians, the Liberals and NDPs, for instance. I doubt you would ever hear them say the same thing. But from Mongolia to say, we're here to ensure that transparency exists and that you have an opportunity to do business, of course, makes Mongolia very exciting to us. Our flagship license that we went public on is Baavhai-Uul. It's in Sukhbatar province in southeast Mongolia in the Gobi Desert. It's 81,000 hectares, so about 60 kilometers by 20 kilometers, roughly 5 times the size of the city of Vancouver. So it's a significant asset. What you're seeing there on that image with all the green spots, each one of those represents a gigafactory. So essentially what Tesla has in Nevada, but of course China with BYD, Geely, NIO, and all the various other auto manufacturers are not only outproducing, but also outselling the rest of the world in terms of electric vehicles, yet they're shipping their lithium from Australia or from Latin America. So our proximity, of course, cannot be denied. When we acquired the license, we found a maximum grade of 811 ppm. As I mentioned, we went public in August 2020, and being first movers in the lithium space in Mongolia, it was rather difficult for us to advance our project without sending our experts, that's Don Haynes and Mark King, over to Mongolia to get work going. But we did manage to drill about 222 holes across the entire asset. That then showed us that we had grades of up to 1,502 ppm, almost double the 811 that we saw historically. But importantly, we found a very strong copper and nickel discovery by the name of Victory. And that had grades of up to 1,252 copper, 494 nickel. And given the scale of this license, it wasn't impossible that we'd find something else. But the important part of copper and nickel, of course, is that they are required alongside lithium for the manufacturing of batteries. So it just makes a better battery manufacturing or battery metals play for us as a company. And then in 2021, we acquired Urgent-Naran. And for Baavhai-Uul, the prior project, I should add, we will be spending more time exploring this asset further at the end of this year or early next. But in 2021, when we acquired Urgent-Naran, this immediately became our focus. And I say that because at 29,000 hectares in Dorngovi province, which is a very infrastructure-rich province in Mongolia, that is the ultimate artery. So all major transportation runs through this province that goes into China. This asset is very typical with respect to what you would expect to see in the Atacama or in Argentina. It looks like a closed basin environment. It is double fault bound. So it checks all the boxes with respect to being a very similar asset. Last year in April 2021, for the first time since having gone public in August 2020, the team, including Don, Mark, myself, were able to go out to Mongolia for the very first time and traverse this property. So we walked across both Baavhai-Uul and Urgent-Naran. At Urgent-Naran, we collected brine on surface in a bottle that you see there on your screen. Unlike how Lithium Americas was born. So Paul Fornazzari, who started Lithium Americas when he was in country with Mark, way back when in 2010, they collected brine in Coca-Cola bottles. And so when we collected this brine at 918 milligrams per liter, of course, that excited us because 918 milligrams is world-class no matter which way you slice it. Having understood and explaining to the market, of course, that anything on surface would be concentrated as a result of natural evaporation, we still wanted to explore this further. So what you see on screen there is our exploration camp in country when we were there in April. The photo on the right there is myself, Don, Mark, and Enki on site, and then some commentary from Mark, where he says everything that he has seen so far is very indicative of the work that he has done either in Nevada or in South America. That then prompted us to run a geophysics program. And what that is it's a program that is used by all junior miners, specifically in the lithium space, but also in the oil and gas space. What you're doing here is you're firing an electrical current below surface, about 400 meters in a 400 by 400 meter grid, and you're measuring resistivity. Anything below half an ohm is extremely good or worth looking at further. Anything at 7 ohm and below is sort of where all the juniors tend to put their cutoff. So at 6.5 ohm cutoff, we had about 22.7 billion cubic meters of low resistivity. At half an ohm cutoff, we had 9.9 billion cubic meters of resistivity. Why that number is important, a company by the name of Arena Minerals that recently sold for about $270 million. They had about 2.1 billion cubic meters. And then if you look at Alpha Lithium, another company that is trading at about $165 million market cap today, they had 1.9 billion cubic meters with a grade of just over 200, giving them 2.1 million ton. So our volumes are undeniable. We were rather excited by that. And given the scale of this thing, it does look like it can be a district or an ultimate mine that comes to production. But we had to drill it. And we did so shortly after we had our geophysics results. We drilled 3 lithological wells and 3 water wells. Lithological wells, the purpose of that is to identify whether that basin is impregnated with lithium. And the water wells, of course, is to sample the brines. So on the hard rock drilling that we concluded, we found that we had about an average 320 ppm concentration across all 3 holes that are drilled over 2 kilometers apart with an average grade of 320 ppm, as I said. And 320 ppm is an important number for our listeners to really understand is, if you look at Albemarle, which is a global major today, they have a mine in Nevada that is the only producing lithium mine from brine in North America today. The fact is that their average grade in Nevada was 121. Ours today is about 320. So with that, I'll just quickly go over to this slide here to say that we are collecting hydrogeological sampling to bring us to inferred resource. And then from a cap table perspective, only 60 million shares out, which is a very tight table, 25% management and insiders, a number of institutions, and of course, some Mongolian investors as well. So thank you for that. Apologies for going long. And Sharon, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ali. So let's begin our Q&A session. So the first question is by Grace, and her question is, are there incentive programs in Mongolia for mining companies, and what is the infrastructure like?
There are definitely incentive programs, so much so for the battery metal space that when we met with the Ministry of Mining here in Toronto back in March during PDAC, they were encouraging us to get to our feasibility as quickly as possible so that they can fast track permitting, which I think is something you don't hear from any government. So yes, on that regard. And in terms of infrastructure, with the One Belt, One Road initiative in particular, our Urgent-Naran project at the bottom of that basin where you're seeing us collect those brine samples, we're 7 kilometers from the power grid. So the national power grid is only 7 kilometers away. We've got a road network and a rail network that leads into China. In some cases, the trains are actually going faster than the traffic on the road. So the infrastructure is actually quite commendable.
Great. So let's have another question, which is from Nabil. Can you introduce a bit regarding your team's lithium exploration experience?
Sure. I thought I'd covered that, but happy to cover it again. So the team consists of Paul Fornazzari, who was the original chairman of Lithium Americas, which is now a $4 billion company. We also have Mark King and Don Haynes, who have both worked on Neolithium, which was an exit to Zijin about 15 months ago for about $1 billion. So we have a fair amount of lithium exploration expertise.
And one last question is from Brandon Ma. Is it the right timing yet for you to land a strategic partner in Asia, or do you need to prove more resource?
I think the time is ripe. We've had some challenges as a result of the Canadian government's announcement last year with respect to divesting from 3 companies into lithium companies that were trading in Canada. But otherwise, we would have closed a strategic transaction by now in terms of a total hold of 9.9%. So the goal for us today is, yes, we want a strategic investor. We want them to come in for 9.9% because that'll validate the work we're doing as first movers, but also give them access to potentially developing this in the future.
Thanks, Ali. That's all the questions. And thank you for the update on Ion Energy's lithium projects.